What's going on, everybody? This is Adam Caplan with AC Radio. Got my man Brett in the studio. He's a little hung this morning, but we're getting it done either way. He's out there laughing. I had to get him a little bit of water, a little bit of some ketchup chips, and now we're ready to go. I got to tell you guys, I'm feeling fucking excited today. I'm feeling good. Sun was shining today. Went out for a little 5K run. Hit a little personal best of my own. And I'm wondering, what kind of personal bests are you guys hitting? What kind of personal records are we hitting? We got to smash those things. We got about, 5-6 months left, whatever it is. I don't have my calendar on me, but we got to start putting our boots to the ground now. We got to roll up our sleeves, get our lunch pails ready, and go to work. We got goals to take on, and we got tasks to achieve, so let's get this done. But first things first, we got to talk about one of the biggest and craziest fights in women's boxing history. We're talking about Katie Taylor, the undisputed champion, the former or current, whatever you want to call it, Olympic gold medalist versus Amanda Serrano at Madison Square Garden. And I got to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, if you did not watch this fight, you got to go on YouTube, you got to go on DAZN, whatever it is you got to do, and you got to watch this. Because what people don't understand is that women in boxing have not had an opportunity like this. And thanks to Eddie Hearn with Matchroom Boxing, and thanks to Jake Paul with Most Valuable Promotions, the job got done. Both ladies earned over 7 figures for the first time in their career. It's probably not even close how much money they actually earned versus their past fights. And I'm really happy to see that. It's nice to see that these hardworking women who put their bodies and heads and everything on the line and are now finally getting compensated for what they deserve. Now, before I get into the fight, let's get into a little bit of a background story here. Eddie Hearn told just such a endearing story about Katie Taylor, who's deemed as a hero in Ireland. Okay, she's absolutely a hero. I think that a lot of people put Conor McGregor on that pedestal, but you know what? If you took away the bravado and the cockiness and a little bit of that arrogance, and he was just a calm, quiet fellow like Katie Taylor, I actually don't think he would be nearly as popular. But Katie Taylor, on the other hand, not only has she won an Olympic gold medal, not only is she the undisputed champion, but Katie Taylor, when she was coming up in the scene, was not actually allowed to box in the amateur circuit in Ireland due to the fact that she was a girl, or she was a woman rather. No, actually, she was a girl at the time. Katie Taylor used to have to go to trainings with headgear on, pull her hair back, and call herself Kay Taylor. She had to pretend that she was a boy, and she went into the amateur circuit, and boy, oh boy, did she beat the brakes off of some of these young gentlemen. And eventually what happened is that Katie Taylor realized, hey, boxing is what I want to make a living off of. Boxing is what I want to do and go all the way to the top with. And that's exactly what she did. Katie Taylor fought boys on the amateur circuit to the point where she actually wrote a letter to the Amateur Irish Boxing Association and said, hey, women should be fighting in the Olympics. Women should be able to fight in professional boxing. But, well, yes, they were able to fight in professional boxing, but rather that they should be able to do it in amateur boxing. And what happened is they essentially wrote her a letter back saying, yeah, we'll come watch you lose. We'll come see you lose, and we'll give you the benefit of the doubt, but we probably won't be impressed, and we probably won't even follow through with whatever aspirations and goals you have, Katie Taylor. The judges came over, the federation came over, and Katie Taylor completely turned their heads and changed their mind. And the next thing you know, fast forward, Katie Taylor is an Olympic gold medalist. And winning the Olympic gold medal is the highest achievement that you could obtain in the amateur boxing circuit. So just an amazing story at the fact that when you get stopped at the door, a person like Katie Taylor busts right through that thing and demands respect and demands the attention and demands a place in boxing history. And that's exactly what she did, okay? And then you look at the likes of Amanda Serrano, her opponent. Amanda Serrano was working in the gym that her older sister was training out of with her coach. And one day, Amanda Serrano gloved up, put on her hand wraps, and said, hey, coach, I believe his name is Jordan. I want to be a boxer. What do you think Jordan did? He laced her up, put her in the ring with her sister. And he whispered into Amanda Serrano's older sister's ear and said, I want you to beat the brakes off of her. I want to see how badly you could break Amanda Serrano down to see if she's really got it. First day they got into the ring together, two lovely Puerto Rican sisters, and they beat the shit out of each other. Rather, Amanda Serrano got the shit beat out of her. She left the ring crying. She took off all her hand wraps. She wiped her face. She took a shower and she went right home. The next day, guess who showed up? Amanda Serrano, ready to glove up, ready to go again. And what did her coach do? Lined her up again against her older sister, and the tactics were the exact same. Let's try to beat her up and break her down and see how badly she actually wants it. And what ended up happening? Amanda Serrano got her butt kicked and then showed up the next day. And the rest is history. Just those two stories alone really paints a picture of the resilience, the persistency, and the overall passion for what these two women have for the sport of boxing. And to think that only now are they getting a seven-figure payday and are they finally selling out an emphatic stadium like MSG, frankly, is absurd. But again, a true testament to their persistency and their consistency, but also their never say never, I am willing to die for this attitude towards the sport of boxing. And that brought us forward to last night, which was Saturday night on DAZN. Eddie Hearn and Jake Paul had came together and put on this fight, and boy, oh boy, did it not disappoint. The fight went all 10 rounds, okay? Katie Taylor came out, did her thing, countering well. Every time that Amanda Serrano threw, Katie Taylor made sure that she was second, third, and fourth. And that was kind of the tale for about the first 2 to 3 rounds. And then in that fourth round, you could see that Amanda Serrano started to lose the respect that she had for Katie Taylor and started to walk her down. And then it brings us to the fifth round. The fifth round was the round that had me on my feet absolutely screaming when Amanda Serrano backed Katie Taylor into a corner, threw a barrage of punches, and absolutely almost knocked out Katie Taylor right then and there. In fact, she had her out on her feet. Then in the sixth round, Katie Taylor was still trying to get her wits about her, and Amanda Serrano just kept coming on, just kept pummeling. And it was just such an exciting experience to be able to watch this two brave women putting their hearts on the line for an undisputed championship. Amanda Serrano moving up 2 weight classes to be able to fight Katie Taylor. And unfortunately, though, once Amanda Serrano felt that she had that momentum gained in the 5th and 6th round, you could start to see that she kind of eased off the gas a little bit. I don't really know what that was. I don't know if that was a matter of gas tank. I don't know if that was a matter of tactics. But at the end of the day, it seemed to serve her a disservice, because what happened is that it gave Katie Taylor enough time to regain her wits about herself. And, based off of the judges' scorecards, she then went on to win the rest of the rounds. Now, I would definitely say that the 3rd round and the 10th round were the 2 rounds that I wasn't 100% sure which way it would sway. The other rounds were quite obvious in terms of who won. But, we kind of had that same old tale of Amanda Serrano being the one who threw perhaps the more powerful and significant punches and the more damaging punches, but with Katie Taylor's counterpunching, with Katie Taylor's grit, with Katie Taylor's speed, she was definitely able to take over those last few rounds, which left a lot of Amanda Serrano fans dumbfounded at the fact that she didn't win that fight. Now, what was interesting to me is in the first few rounds, you could kind of see that Katie Taylor's punches were stopping Amanda Serrano in her tracks a little bit. But once that 5th round came along and Amanda Serrano just threw away her respect for Katie Taylor and put it on her, you were able to see that the tides were now turning. But then again, the great Katie Taylor, who's the undisputed champion, an Irish hero, an absolute legend of the sport of boxing, again, was able to get her wits about her and was able to coast, not even coast, but was able to implement her game plan to win the rest of the rounds against Amanda Serrano. And I understand how some folks feel that Amanda Serrano was robbed, but I don't believe that this fight was a robbery in any sense, and I'll tell you why. Nobody lost in that fight. Amanda Serrano moved up 2 weight classes, okay? When we watch the men fight and somebody moves up 2 weight classes, unless it's somebody like Canelo, unless it's somebody like a Floyd Mayweather, unless it's somebody like a Pacquiao, the expectations of being able to beat the heavier champion are far less. But in this instance, Amanda Serrano had a shot, and she will have another shot in that rematch, and that rematch is going to be bigger than the first one was. And Katie Taylor joked, hey, we both got paid $1 million. Make sure the next one's 2. And I agree with that. Both of these women deserve all of the money, all of the respect, and all of the coverage from the media. And that's exactly what they got in the first one. And I hope that that's exactly what they get in the second one now. You know, again, like I said, it's a little bit of a classic case of significant strikes versus punches landed. You know, Katie Taylor does have a little bit still of that amateur style. Well, she'll throw a million punches in a round, and not all of them will be necessarily significant, but they're certainly dictating the pace of the fight, the control of the fight, and also it is obviously hurting her opponent or stopping them from implementing their game plan. But Amanda Serrano is a true pro boxer through and through. She walks forward, throws significant strikes, throws caution to the wind, and she has a heart of gold. So I was on my feet for the whole fight. I thought that this was a fantastic, fantastic fight. I thought Eddie Hearn and Jake Paul did the number one. They did the right thing. They did the right thing by putting these 2 women on. They chose the perfect 2 ladies to be able to put women's boxing back on the map. And that's no disrespect to Clarissa Shields, who's also been an undisputed champion, also won an Olympic gold medal. But Clarissa Shields has never really had that dance partner to make her feel whole or to really put a stamp on her career. And I think that Amanda Serrano and Katie Taylor are 2 peas in a pod that were perfect for each other. And like I tweeted on Saturday night, I could watch that fight 1,000 more times. 20,000 people were on their feet. The Irish were there in full force, like I stated would happen. And the Puerto Rican community were there in full force, like I stated would happen. I'd say about 40% of the crowd were flown in from Ireland. An amazing, amazing, amazing feat. The Irish are the best traveling fans in the universe. So I tip my hat off to these ladies. I don't want to delve too much into the controversy of the judging. The judging is never right. The judging is always going to be fucked up. This is the name of the game when you're dealing with the sport of boxing and also the sport of MMA. The judges have a completely different view on the fight than we do, and 9 out of 10 times, we don't even agree with them. So if you're concerned about the judging in boxing or MMA, hop on that Google, apply for a job, and let's change combat sports together then. Let's get some proper judging in there, ladies and gentlemen. I'd also say that I wasn't really a big fan of the ref, Michael Griffin, hailing from Canada. Felt that he was standing a little bit too far apart from the ladies, and you could see a couple of times at the end of the round, both of these ladies were ready to keep fighting. And you know why they were ready to keep fighting? Because the rounds are only 2 minutes. That was a fight that needed 3-minute rounds. These ladies go at 100 million miles an hour in terms of how they throw their punches, how they move their head, and how they go about the sport of boxing. They needed that extra minute in each round to keep working. I mean, hey, imagine that 5th round if Amanda Serrano had another minute. Do we see Katie Taylor on the floor? Do we see Amanda Serrano as the undisputed champion? Maybe, perhaps. I'm not sure because that's not the case. Amanda Serrano, though, in the pre-fight press conference was the one who was itching for those 3-minute rounds to happen. And Katie Taylor said, I think it's fine the way it is. And quite frankly, after that 5th round, I could understand why she felt that way. But Katie Taylor wins a split decision, a moment in history, a moment for those who were watching will never forget, an inspiration to all women around the world, an inspiration to all men around the world. For those fight fans that don't give female fighters a chance, this is the fight to get your ass in the seat and start changing your perspective. I tip my hat to Katie Taylor. I tip my hat to Amanda Serrano. I pray to God that the 2 of them do another rematch, not only for my entertainment, not only for the world's entertainment, and not only for to put another feather in the cap of their careers, but I also want the 2 of them to be making that moolah. because that's what matters. This is why they do that sport. Okay, both of these ladies made over $1 million or maybe $1 million on the nose. Previously, before that, some of them were getting paid $100 a round. Some of them were making $5K. Sometimes they were making $10K, maybe 20, maybe 30, maybe 40. But this time they made 7 figures. And let this be known that women's boxing is here to stay. And let these two ladies be the reason why the next Katie Taylor or the next Amanda Serrano waltzes into that gym. Why? Because on Saturday night, April 30th at MSG, Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano made history, and they inspired us. And I thank those ladies tremendously because they put their hearts on the line. There's a part of me that keeps wanting to say balls, but you obviously know why I'm not going to say that. Now, the biggest thing that kind of bothered me about it was right away Jake Paul goes into promoter mode. He starts calling the shots. Oh, it was a robbery. It was a robbery. We got to do the rematch. Now, this is a common theme that I was seeing throughout the entire week. Eddie Hearn and Jake Paul were a perfect match for each other. Eddie Hearn's got that beautiful British banter, and Jake Paul, when is he not running his mouth? I think the guy even runs his mouth when he sleeps. That's just the name of the game. But, the biggest thing for me was just some of the mind games that the two of these guys were playing. I mean, Eddie Hearn turned around to Jake Paul. He called him an average boxer, said you'll never be a top 10 fighter. Maybe you could win an international belt, which in my opinion was actually quite the compliment. I mean, an international belt, a WBC international title is quite the feat. So it was kind of funny how Eddie Hearn was playing into the ego of Jake Paul, calling him an average boxer, stating the fact that he's never fought a good fighter, completely disregarding the resume of Tyron Woodley, who's a 5-time UFC champion. And you know what? Jake Paul bit on the bait. They were doing a Q&A together, or they were doing a tag team media scrum together. And, Jake Paul turned around and said, oh yeah, you think I'm an average fighter? I'll fight anybody on your 400 stable roster. You should have seen the eyes on Eddie Hearn. The guy went, bing, cha-ching, moolah. I got Jake Paul exactly where I want him. I called him an average fighter. I said he couldn't beat anybody on my stable who have less than 10 fights. And what did Jake Paul do? He played right into that. And Eddie Hearn thinks that he's so slick, chasing the bag by being critical of Jake Paul's career and the path that Jake Paul has taken. But what he doesn't realize is that Jake Paul gets buckets too. Jake Paul definitely secures the bag as well, and Jake Paul has proven to not be fearless. I mean, you guys could say what you want about him, but, in your 4th and 5th fight, fighting a former 5-time UFC champion who's got nuclear bombs in his overhand right is something to be worried about, something to be afraid about. And Jake Paul wasn't worried, and it doesn't seem like he's worried again. So I tip my hat to Eddie Hearn. I tip my hat to Jake Paul. They had the banter going on. They made $1 million bet, and you could start to see slowly how that really grabbed the media's attention, started to make Eddie Hearn a little nervous because he had the law team in the background saying, hold on now, Eddie. Jake's new to the sport. He doesn't really understand how these things work. You can't be betting on your fighters. Can't be the Pete Rose of boxing here. Betting on your own team or your own fighters. Let's keep it professional. And if Jake now wants to donate a little bit of money to charity, which they are going to work out, that would be the safest route. So Eddie Hearn ain't going to be pocketing that $1 million. Sorry for Katie Taylor, because I really thought that Eddie would have just handed her an extra $1 million from Jake Paul. And trust me, it would have been satisfying for Katie Taylor to receive another $1 million payout from Jake Paul, because let's just say, I'm sure she could find other people that she would rather go for a pint with. So, again, an amazing performance by Amanda Serrano and Katie Taylor. The mind games were on point between Eddie Hearn and Jake Paul. Jake Paul has a photo of Eddie Hearn in his gym because Eddie Hearn has stated before how average he thinks that Jake Paul is. But for any of those with a brain in their head knows, this is a tactic. Eddie Hearn is trying to secure the bag with Jake Paul, and we'll see if that'll happen, because this morning Jake Paul announced that he'll be back fighting August 13th. That brings to the question, who would he fight? So far we got Tommy Fury on the list, Anderson Silva, and perhaps Sonny Bill Williams. And some of the viewers are wondering who's Sonny Bill Williams. Well, AC's here to tell you who. Not only do I know boxing, not only do I know MMA, not only do I know health and fitness and a sprinkle of motivation, I also know my rugby. I played for 10 years. Sonny Bill Williams is a former World Cup champion with the New Zealand All Blacks. He's also played in the NRL, which is the National Rugby League, which is a different sect of rugby. And he's also, I believe, 10-0 in boxing and has more notable wins over actual boxers versus Jake Paul. And one of the things that was brought to Jake's attention backstage is, hey, Sonny Bill Williams versus you at cruiserweight in Australia would be a huge bout. What was Jake Paul's response? Fuck him. That's what he said. He said, fuck him. Why did he say that? Well, probably at the fact that Jake Paul doesn't know too many people outside of America besides KSI. And also due to the fact that I do believe that Tommy Fury and Anderson Silva would be the bigger names. When I'm looking at the three of those fighters, I think that Anderson would probably be the most difficult of them all. Tommy would potentially actually be the easiest of them all. And Sonny Bill Williams, there's a lot of risk there. There's a lot of risk there because he fights at heavyweight, so he would have to cut down, number one, but also number two, at the fact that he's not as well known in the American market. Are the American fans going to care about this? Yeah, sure, Australia, New Zealand, and everything in between would perhaps be pretty excited about it, but Jake Paul's an America first guy, so he's only going to be fighting somebody that the rest of the United States get down with, know about, and are going to sink their hands into their pockets and pay that pay-per-view money for. So, just an overall fantastic weekend between all of the showmanship, all of the antics, again, the gamesmanship that we spoke about in the last episode. It was all on point. It was absolutely all on point, and I can't wait for August 13th. Yeah, I like Jake Paul. He puts his balls on the table, and I have respect for people that do that. So August 13th, whether you like it or not, Jake Paul is going to be fighting, and we'll see if Eddie Hearn is going to do everything in his power to make sure that he is co-promoting that fight with one of his opponents. However, the only chance that I think that he will have of co-promoting it is if Sonny Bill Williams is perhaps involved. I think that Anderson Silva has his own promoter. Tommy Fury is obviously set up with Frank Warren, so you best believe you know why they brought up the fact that he should fight Sonny Bill Williams and not Anderson and not Tommy Fury. So August 13th, whether you like it or not, Jake Paul is coming back. And, in terms of the rematch with Amanda Serrano and Katie Taylor, it'll take a little bit of time to actually know when that'll happen and when the two of those brave women will get into the ring together. But for now, we'll listen to the song and dance of wanting the rematch at Croke Park, which would be an emphatic thing, huge for Irish history. 82,000 people packed to the gills in that stadium. But I think once Eddie Hearn sits down with the Irish Commission and understands also how much they're going to take away in taxes, I think this fight actually might go down in Wembley and not so much Croke Park, but we'll see about that. And, another thing that I ended up speaking about on Twitter is that, mark my words, if Katie Taylor fights Amanda Serrano in Croke Park, you best believe that Dana White will be on the phone with Conor McGregor, and Conor McGregor will make damn sure that he will then have a main event fight at Croke Park. Now, if I had a magic 8-ball or I had a genie, I would wish that Jake Paul would fight Conor McGregor, and then on the co-main event, we would have Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano. And I know what you guys are all thinking. How the hell would you put them in the main event and not those two legends and put those two legends in the co-main event? But you know how the game goes. Money talks, bullshit walks. And Conor McGregor and Jake Paul is one of the biggest fights that we could see, from a viewership standpoint. Probably not the biggest fight in fight history. It's not Ali Frazier. It's not Ali versus Foreman, the Rumble in the Jungle. But these are two guys with egos bigger than the world. with everything to gain and also a lot to lose because, well, actually, Jake has less to lose because if you lose to McGregor, it was to be expected, but Conor has a lot to lose. Conor does have a lot to lose, and he was chirping Jake Paul last night with the Jimmy Seville glasses. He said, who the fuck is that guy? And that's exactly what he did. And Jake started jawing back at him on Twitter. So, it's always entertaining when Conor is in the game, when he's got happy thumbs and he's ready to fucking lay out an assault rifle of tweets to somebody. And it's always better to see when Conor McGregor has an adversary. When he has somebody in the middle of that dartboard, you best believe he's going to hit it right down the center. So, whether or not all four of those fighters fight on the same card, that's one thing. But I really do think that fight is going to eventually happen. Don't worry, audio listeners, I'm still with you. Drinking my wild cherry Happy Dad. Didn't mention it last show. We're mentioning it again. Now, one of the things that I woke up to this morning, I woke up with an overwhelming feeling of happiness and motivation and just like a readiness to me. Today I went out there, I ran my 5K. It's probably the first time in over 2 years that I ran 5K straight without having to take a walk. Boy, was I paying for it after, but I was so proud of myself. Y'all got to get in there and start doing things that you're proud of. Because that's what's going to propel the next day and the next day and the next day. And once that ball's rolling and once that momentum starts to feel like it's moving on a downward slope, there's nothing stopping you. It's like an avalanche. It's like an earthquake. It's like a rock slide. Okay? Now, what I wanted to talk about is that you got to take a look in the mirror sometimes and evaluate things. What's holding me back? What is stopping me from obtaining what I want to obtain? What do I need to add into my life to provide that extra boost that's going to make me feel happy and ready to go out and accomplish my goals? I encourage all of you to take a piece of paper, take a hard look at yourself, write out the pros and cons of some of the things that you're doing. Whether it's drinking or it's smoking or it's hanging out with the wrong crowd or it's spending too much time on TikTok. What is it? What is it that is holding you back? Okay? Until you take that hard look at yourself, you're always going to wonder, why can't I be the best version of myself? Why can't I feel like $1 million every time I wake up in the morning? What is going to get me to the top? What is the fastest and quickest route is not going to help. But what's going to help is a solid game plan and a nice hot cup of the truth. Hey, the reason why I'm not accomplishing my goals is because of A. Another reason is B. And hey, there's even another reason C. And what would be the game plan to be able to trim that fat? And sometimes it's a friend. Sometimes it's a family member. Now, I'm not going to go Gary V on you. Fuck your parents, fuck your parents. I'm not going to go Gary V on you. I'm not. But what you need to understand is that when it comes down to accomplishing goals, when it comes down to becoming the best version of yourself, you have to be selfish in some instances. You have to be able to say no. You have to be able to put yourself first. Because if you fail to do that, you will then fail to always feel like second place in your own heart and in your own mind. And you will never achieve that highest level of confidence because the problem is that you've always said tomorrow and you've always blamed somebody. You see that spit again? Ba-bang. You've always blamed somebody. You've always blamed it on the fact that you're addicted to going out and partying. You're addicted to going out perhaps and smoking weed or whatever the case may be. Guys, sometimes you got to take a hard look at yourself, realize what is holding you back, what could propel you forward, and what is the plan of action to get you to where you want to go. That's what you got to do. And I left a hard pause there because I want you to think about it. Whether you're listening to me on audio or you're watching me on video, I want you to think about it. Amanda Serrano and Katie Taylor broke history when every single obstacle was thrown at them. They weren't making money, they were rejected, and they didn't feel wanted or needed in the sport, but they never let that get in the way. And that's all I got for you today, baby. AC Radio, short and sweet, we're out.